What if I told you that the biggest horror franchise in modern times, with perhaps the biggest writer in Kevin Williamson and the biggest director in horror with Wes Craven, that franchise had big mistakes in every single movie? Well, today we're reviewing the biggest mistake in each Scream movie 1 through 6. Let's begin! So Ryan, let's start off by going in order, Scream 1 through 6, listing the biggest mistake of each of the films. So starting off with Scream 1996, Ryan, what is the biggest mistake?
Okay, so for me, this is my personal list of mistakes that each movie has made, and then Kevin will be giving his personal list of mistakes that each movie has made. So starting off with Scream 1996. So this movie is one of the better movies of the Scream franchise, and I know it is hailed as the gold standard, and people generally keep it at the top of their list on any tier ranking when it comes to comparing the different movies of the franchise with each other. But there are some things that I don't like about this movie. One of them being is that I feel as though there are not enough Ghostface chase sequences in this film. And if you rewatch Scream and compare it to some of the other installments, especially like Scream 2, you will see exactly what I'm saying. There's not enough Ghostface chase sequences. We only get a few of them because the film deliberately focuses more on the meta commentary, and it also focuses more on the tropes and building tension instead of us having the Ghostface sequences. So one of them that I can think of off the top of my head is the chase sequence where Sydney is in the bathroom and she hears the girls talking about her.
Maybe she's a slut, just like her mother. You're evil. Please, it's a common fact.
And then all of a sudden you get the Ghostface boots, the shot where the boots are, hitting the ground in the stall, and then all of a sudden out pops Ghostface. So yeah, that's a chase sequence. Then you get the mansion sequence where we are at Stu Macher's home and we have Tatum he gets killed in the garage. I thought that one was kind of lame. I didn't think it was a lot of tension build up because she's trapped in the garage, tries to go out the doggy door, and that's not how garages work. And Ghostface kills her with the garage. Then we have Sydney getting chased in that third act by Ghostface, and that chase, you already know that she's not going to die. So I mean, that's really about it in that first film. There's not many Ghostface chase sequences, and that's why I say that's that movie's biggest mistake. And Scream 2 actually corrects that. So what about you, Kevin? What is your biggest mistake for Scream 1996?
So the biggest mistake for Scream 1996 is the death of Tatum Riley.
No, please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel.
Tatum Riley is Sidney Prescott's best friend throughout this particular movie. So we see them hanging out at school. They're also staying over at the house together and things of that nature. It seems as though what Scream was trying to do is build this dynamic duo with Sidney and Tatum. However, this dynamic duo that we think we're going to get for the entire trilogy, starting off with Scream 1996, comes to an end in the third act as Tatum is killed off in the garage scene, the infamous garage scene where she tries to get through the little cat door or the little doggy door, and Ghostface pushes the remote to have the garage let up, which ultimately leads to Tatum's demise. So for here, we don't know a whole lot about Tatum, but let's think about what could have been if Tatum was in Scream 2 and Scream 3. We would have seen a dynamic duo return for Scream 2 and 3. We would have had perhaps one of the biggest dynamic duos in Final Girl history of all time had Tatum continued and survived. We would have seen a lot of jokes between brother and sister jokes with Dewey and Tatum in Screams 2 and 3, and that would have provided us a lot of comedic relief in those films. And additionally, we would have gotten a sister's perspective on Dewey's romance with Gil. How lovely that would have been for all of you guys, like myself and my brother, who have a sister who gives perspective, especially perspective about dating and stuff like that. This would have been the stuff to watch for. But the fact that this film ends Tatum Riley is, I submit to you, the biggest mistake of Scream 1996. So moving on to Scream 2, 1997. Ryan, what is the biggest mistake?
Okay, so all of y'all know, or should at least know by now, that Scream 2, 1997 is my favorite Scream movie in the franchise. Simply because, as I said, this movie corrects some of the things that the first movie did not do, like with the Ghostface sequences. However, every movie in this franchise has something that it didn't do very well, or a mistake that it made. And with this one, I would say the biggest mistake is having too many throwaway characters available for disposal. So in this film, we get more characters. It seems as though the cast gets larger, and from Scream 1 to Scream 2. A couple of honorable mentions of some of these throwaway characters that I'm talking about is one of them being Hallie's character. We don't get to know much about her besides the fact that she's Sydney's roommate in college. We don't get, to know her more. We don't get hardly any scenes where we get to understand, more about her. She's one example of a throwaway character that I'm referring to. And then also Cece's character, which is played by Sarah Michelle Gellar. So she gets killed off, I believe it was in the first act of the film. She just gets thrown off the balcony by Ghostface when she's in that sorority house. And we don't really get to know her that well. And I think what this second film was trying to do was mimic somewhat of the first film by giving us a large or a well-established Hollywood actress, as they did with Drew Barrymore in the first film, and make you seem as though they're going to be a finalist in the movie, and then they pull the rug off, or they try to pull the rug off from underneath you, and they kill that character off. But I thought that we should have gotten a little bit more out of those characters, and those are the characters I'm referring to that this movie did not do a good job of developing, and I would say that that is the mistake that this movie has. So what about you, Kevin? What is your biggest mistake for Scream 2, 1997?
So the biggest mistake for Scream 2, 1997 is the killing of Randy Meeks. As we all know, The Odyssey is coming up in July. I'm ready. I don't know about you. I'm ready to see that movie. I'm very happy about this movie coming out. But as you know, if you've read The Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey, that the muse is the inspiration of the Odyssey, as they talk about. And if you went to high school and you were in your English class sometime in high school, your teacher explained to you about the muse and how important the muse was for Homer's Odyssey. So how does that relate to Randy Meeks' death? Well, like Calliope is the muse for Homer's Odyssey, Randy Meeks is the muse for the Scream franchise. He provides an essential characteristic that makes Scream different from any horror franchise that you have ever seen, and that is the meta commentary critique. We notice in the Act 3 of the original Scream, 1996, we see Randy Meeks stand up in front of his fellow peers and provide that commentary in Stu Macher's living room about the rules of horror, setting up the first time that we've seen a meta critique by a large horror franchise. This was the revival of horror, which had dragged and needed to be resuscitated back in the 90s because of the rehashing and all the tropes of that nature. So yes, this killing of Randy Meeks in Scream 2 out in the public made the franchise weaker as the next Scream started to come out, because we didn't get that consistency with the meta commentary in Scream 3. They had to resort to basically retconning Randy Meek back into the movie through an old videotape where he assumed his death was imminent. And then in the subsequent Screams, we have people try to provide meta commentary, like in Scream 4 through the opening scenes with the meta on meta on meta. And then in Scream 5 and 6, we see that through Mindy's character, but it doesn't hit the same as the original muse, which is Randy Meeks. And for that reason, the killing of Randy Meeks in Scream 2 1997 is Scream 2's biggest mistake. So Ryan, moving on to Scream 3 2000. What is the biggest mistake of this movie?
Okay, so this movie, Scream 3 2000, is considered one of the worst Scream movies in the franchise. And honestly, I don't think it's the worst in the franchise. But a lot of people like to think that this movie is not good because the typical answer is because Kevin Williamson is not writing or didn't write the script for this movie. But that's not my reason why, or that is not my reason that this movie has its mistake or biggest mistake. So my reason that this movie has, or its biggest mistake, is that this movie does not kill off a major, and I said major, legacy character at all. That's the problem with this movie. That's his biggest mistake. Now, you know you're gonna say, well, Cotton Leary got killed off in the opening act, but Cotton Leary was not a major legacy character. He was a legacy character, but not a major one. I think this movie, the issue is that we should have seen one of our legacy characters get killed off. We had a legacy character, major one, killed off in Scream 2. You had Randy killed off, as Kevin just said. That was a mistake that Kevin said because Randy was able to convey a lot of meta commentary to the audience, which is not something that we're used to seeing in movies. And that's why that movie, Randy's character stands out and the Scream franchise stands out. But I think either Gail or Dewey or even Sidney Prescott, one of them should have been, one of those characters should have been killed off in this movie. I think that would have made this movie a better movie just because it shows that the stakes are higher, but we didn't get that. We just got, surface level throwaway characters killed off. So that is Scream 3's biggest mistake, in my opinion. Kevin, what is Scream 3's biggest mistake?
So Scream 3's biggest mistake is not having Kevin Williamson finish off the trilogy. As many of you have seen, or at least heard reviews about one of the biggest flops in horror cinema with the Strangers trilogy, which just finished, and we saw it bomb this past week. And you know how important it is to finish a trilogy well. Unfortunately, as you know, with the Strangers, it did not finish well, it flopped. And although Scream 3 did not flop in such a big fashion as The Strangers Chapter 3 flopped for the Strangers franchise, it did flop because Kevin Williamson was not the writer. In fact, he was replaced with Aaron Kruger. And so we see this big drop off is made apparent from the retconning of Roman Bridger throughout this movie, that he was the mastermind. And it wasn't Billy Loomis and Stu Macher that were the mastermind of the killings that occurred in Scream 1996. And that somehow Roman Bridger was one of the half brothers or siblings of Sidney Prescott, and Sidney did not know of it. And all of this stuff, which kind of was a stretch and didn't make sense. And then we see this goofy dialogue of some of the secondary and tertiary characters like Tyson Fox and Sarah Darling playing into stereotypes, instead of the film focusing on dismantling the stereotype of the black guy being the court jester or the beautiful woman not being able to show off her intelligence. What it does is it plays into it instead of dismantling. We wanted to see something different, something where the stereotypes don't exist or the stereotypes would have been subverted. But the film doesn't do that. It plays into it and seems to lack that meta commentary. And then we are retconning in the video footage of Randy Meeks giving some type of review, knowing that he's going to die, in commentary at the very sort of end of the second act. This was absurd. And the deaths that you see, like the lighting of the lighter there, and then the home blowing up and stuff like that. It wasn't memorable. In fact, nothing seemed to make sense. We saw Sidney Prescott hiding out in her abode, and she's not really seen until the third act. All of this was evidence that Kevin Williamson wasn't writing it, and that someone else who was not as gifted as a writer, at least with the Scream franchise, was trying to match things around and mimic and copy off of Kevin Williamson, but he did a very bad impersonation of Kevin Williamson's writing. Sorry, Mr. Kruger. That's the reason why I feel as though this was the biggest error of this film. Additionally, we look at the box office and notice that this movie for the entire original trilogy had the worst performance at the box office. And I submit to you that was in part due to the fact that Kevin Williamson was not the author of the script. And for that reason, the biggest mistake of Scream 3 is not having Kevin Williamson write the script. Ryan, Scream 4, 2011. What is the biggest mistake of this movie?
Okay, so those of you that know me know that Scream 4 has a lot of problems. There are a ton of problems with this movie. But the title of this video is every Scream movie's biggest mistake. And with that being said, the problem with Scream 4, which I know is a lot of people who love Scream, one of their favorite films of the franchise, the issue with this film is the cast is absolutely terrible. This is one of the worst casts that I have seen in the Scream franchise. And we've seen every movie, we've given a review on every single Scream movie. This cast is bad, ladies and gentlemen. Starting with the characters that are not utilized very well, such as Jill's boyfriend, Trevor, does not give a good performance. You don't believe any chemistry in their relationship at all. Not memorable. The ghost faces we get, while I will say that Jill has good motivations, like her motivations of being Ghostface, they make the most sense to me. And she gives a good performance as Ghostface. The issue is that the other Ghostface we get in Charlie, terrible Ghostface. Not believable from an acting point of view, nor from a physical point of view, because you know that these Ghostfaces, Jill or Emma Roberts is 5'2", and then Charlie is what, like 5'5" or 5'6", and they're over here just beating cops around and all kind of stuff, and having all these elaborate plans and schemes and going out slaughtering people left and right. And you mean to tell me that they're the Ghostfaces? No, they are not. And then the characters outside of the Ghostface and the core group of friends, none of them are memorable. Maybe Kirby, but other than that, it's like none of them. You don't care about any of these characters at all. You have no emotional investment in them, period. And so I would say to you that this movie's biggest mistake is having a bad cast, and it shows, because this movie did terrible at the box office, and the franchise went to rest for 12 years or 11 years. It was 11 years later until we got a sequel. So that is the reason why this movie has, that is this movie's biggest mistake. So Kevin, what is Scream 4's biggest mistake?
The biggest mistake of Scream 4 is the Ghostface's reveal in this movie. As Ryan mentioned, we see two actors that are under 5'7", who we find out in the reveal are Ghostface. Why is this important? Well, when we see the scenes of Ghostface, he's not short. He's not short for a female or male. In fact, he's either average height for a male, around 5'10", or taller than average. And so we see these kill scenes where Ghostface is 5'10" or taller, seeming to have some height to him. But the actual reveal of Ghostface is someone that's 5'2", or another person that's 5'5", 5'6". So this made Ghostface. This is where in the franchise from 4 through 6, we start to see this unbelievability of Ghostface, where Ghostface is tall, but the actual characters who claim to be Ghostface are, in many cases, petite, or at least one of the Ghostfaces, in this case both of them, but at least one of the Ghostfaces in Scream 5 and 6 were petite. But I digress, because we're talking about Scream 4. So while I enjoyed Emma Roberts, basically her play and her acting in this particular movie, I felt it was convincing of her motivations of why she's Ghostface.
Don't you get it? This has never been about killing you. It's about becoming you.
And then Rory Culkin's character, Charlie Walker, his performance was not really that impactful or memorable. His motivation seemed to be liking. He has some obsession over Jill Roberts, and that's the reason why he joins in to be the quote unquote muscle of this particular movie. Unfortunately, this reveal of these two characters being Ghostface is unbelievable. Now, if someone told me that Ghostface, when you put on the mask and you put on the gown of Ghostface, that if you're shorter, you grow 6 inches, then this is believable. But we know, at least are never told, that there's this fantastical element of Ghostface where anyone who puts on the mask grows 6 inches to become much taller than what they otherwise are. And so for that reason, I would say the reveal of two actors under 5'7" to be Ghostface, when we know from the scenes, the kill scenes, that Ghostface is not a short person. This is the biggest mistake of Scream 4. Moving on to Scream 5, 2022. Ryan, what is the biggest mistake?
Okay, so the biggest mistake with Scream 5 from 2022, and I'm gonna just go ahead and not sugarcoat it, it is that opening sequence, ladies and gentlemen. That opening sequence was a carbon copy from the first Scream. It was as if the film directors and producers put in no effort in order to come up with a script that would set the tone for this movie. We also, with that scene, do not actually get a kill at all, because we learned that Jenna Ortega's character of Tara Carpenter survives the attack, which, you know, by watching that scene, if you go back and watch it, there's no way she could have survived that. There's no way. So with me, I'm gonna keep it short and sweet on this one. That opening sequence was just straight up trash. And that is the reason why this film did not do as well on my tier list when we rank these movies. And that is this movie's biggest mistake. Kevin, what is Scream 5 2022's biggest mistake?
The biggest mistake of Scream 5 2022 is that the Ghostface who kills our beloved Dewey is Amber Freeman. Now, I say this, it's because the actress who plays Amber Freeman is 5'3", and we see that Ghostface, when he is taking Dewey out, is eye level to Dewey, or at least not short. We know that David Arquette, who plays Dewey, is 5'10". So it stands to reason for someone to be eye level with you if they are Ghostface, they must be somewhere around 5'10", maybe 5'8" at the shortest, at the tallest 6 foot, but somewhere between 2 inches shorter to 2 inches taller within that range. But we know Mickey Madison is 5'3". And this is not a knock on Mickey Madison, because she is a phenomenal actress. At her age of only being 26, she's already won an Academy Award. So it just shows how talented of an actress she is. But unfortunately, she doesn't fit this particular role if we are to believe that Ghostface is around the same height as Dewey during Dewey's death scene in the hospital. So all throughout this 3 to 4 minute scene, as I'm watching Dewey go through the hallway, and then we see Ghostface get up, stab Dewey, and then stab him in the back, and then reach over him to stab him in the back and the front at the same time, it would stand that this person has to be within the ballpark of Dewey as far as height or taller. And so when they said that she was the killer of Dewey, one of the legendary characters, perhaps one of the most famous characters of the movie for the franchise, except for Sidney Prescott and Gail Weathers, this was unbelievable. It was implausible. And for that reason, this is the biggest mistake of Scream 5. Moving on to Scream 6, 2023. Ryan, what is the biggest mistake?
Okay, so Scream 6 is definitely a step up from Scream 5 by far. But like I said before, all of these films have something they didn't do right. And the main issue that I have with Scream 6 is the fact that we have 3 terrible Ghostfaces. And for some reason, Radio Silence decided to do quantity over quality. These Ghostfaces are probably the worst. They might even be worse than the Scream 5 Ghostfaces, because you don't remember any of these. Like, you don't even know, like, Ethan's character disappears. He only says like a couple of lines throughout the first 2 acts, and then appears in the 3rd act again as Ghostface. And you're just thinking, like, really? This guy is Ghostface? Then you have a 60-something-year-old man who is a New York NYPD detective who somehow happens to get assigned to the case dealing with Sam and Tara. He just magically happens to get assigned the case, doesn't have a partner. He's interviewing them, you know, with no partner or anything, no other detectives involved on the case, just solo him. And the fact that he is our Ghostface is revealed in the 3rd act, you're just thinking to yourself, man, this is one of the worst 3rd acts of the Scream franchise in general. And then Quinn, and apparently based on the story, Quinn is supposedly the Ghostface who took out Gail's boyfriend in the apartment sequence, because Ethan's character was off doing something during that time. So the Ghostface that took out Gail's partner or her boyfriend was actually supposed to be Quinn. So there is no way that that girl took that big man out like that. There is no way. That is unplausible, not believable at all, because he got thrown through that coffee table like he was nothing. And you mean to tell me that she did that? So that is my biggest issue with this film. Even though it does go in some bold directions by having Ghostface attack people in public places, that is still not enough to make up for the fact that we got these 3 terrible Ghostfaces. Terrible. So Kevin, what is Scream 6's biggest mistake?
So the biggest mistake of Scream 6, likewise and akin to Ryan's mistake that he pointed out, is the reveal of the Kershes being the 3.
It was a good way to get off the suspect list. Stab Gail Weathers, stab Mindy on the train.
Ghostfaces. So we understand their motivation. Richie Kirsch was killed by Sam in Scream 5. And so they wanted to avenge the loss of their dead brother. And so we understand that, but the problem that I have is not the motivation. The problem that I have is the execution of this setup of these attempted murders and murders. So we have here 3 people, Ethan, Quinn, and Detective Bailey, move all the way across country, West Coast to the East Coast to New York. And somehow, some way, Detective Bailey gets a NYPD job. And we see Ethan and Quinn go to colleges in the Northeast there in New York. So that's somewhat plausible. But we think about Detective Bailey and how he was able to individually interrogate Tara and Sam. And oh yeah, you might say, well, there was FBI there with Kirby, but we're talking about the NYPD, which is one of the biggest law enforcement agencies in the United States. And I submit to you, one of the biggest law enforcement agencies in the entire world. And you mean to tell me that they're only going to assign one detective to interrogate and investigate a mass murders? Well, maybe they're not considered mass murders, but they're a series of murders. Here, they have the resources, and perhaps it is their protocol. And I submit to you, it is likely their protocol that they have multiple investigators or detectives assigned when there are multiple murders. And so the believability of a Detective Bailey being able to interrogate for every single murder on his own free will is just unbelievable, and something the New York Police Department would never allow. And he would never get away with that. So it is not believable. And then, as Ryan was talking about, we have Quinn, who's maybe 5'6", perhaps 5'7". Her brother Ethan looks 6'1", 6'2". And then we have Detective Bailey, who looks like he's 5'9". So there's at least a 3-inch or more height gap between the next tallest person, Detective Bailey to his daughter Quinn, from Detective Bailey to his son Ethan. But when we see double ghost faces appear in the scenes, they're the same height. How is this possible? If these 3 individuals are the ghost faces in the movie, I submit to you, this is the biggest mistake of Scream 6. And I submit to you that Radio Silence has had an issue with this believability. Either tell us whether or not Ghostface, when you put on the mask and the gown, you grow taller, or if you're really tall, you go shorter to be Ghostface. If that's true, let us know that, but they have not identified that as true. So we have to assume that you are the height off the mask as you are with the mask. And for that reason, it's the biggest mistake. So guys, we just completed our biggest mistakes for all 6 Screams up to this point. We know that Scream 7 is coming up here at the end of the month. So I would like to know, and both Ryan and I would like to know, what do you feel are the biggest mistakes? Please comment below. Ryan, what are we working on?
Okay, so we are pushing out a ton of tier counts that are focused on Scream, and we're trying to get these out as soon as possible with the release of, or before the release of Scream 7. So we got Ghostfaces ranked coming out. We also have top Ghostface chase sequences coming to you soon, and then Ghostface kills, best Ghostface kills. So we got a lot of content that we're pushing out that's focused on Scream. So yeah, so just stay tuned, and we have tons of other videos with Scream for you all to watch. So yeah.
And remember, Fright Fam, be watchful.